The day I found out I was pregnant, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. I had never been with anyone. Not once. Not ever. And yet there it was. Two pink lines staring back at me like they had somewhere better to be and were just waiting for me to catch up. I'm either carrying a miracle or someone did something to me that I don't remember. And the second thought, that one didn't make me laugh at all. My name is Callum Reed, and I want to be very clear about something. I did not ask for any of this. I was 23, broke in the specific way that only biology PhD students are broke, and living in a studio apartment in Northeast Portland where the radiator made sounds like it was processing grief. I had a half-eaten bowl of cereal on my desk, 3 overdue library books, and exactly one friend who answered my texts after 10 p.m. I was also apparently pregnant. The test was still in my hand when my phone buzzed. My roommate/only friend Dominic was calling from downstairs. "Cal, you've been in that bathroom for 40 minutes. Did you fall in? Give me a second." "That's what you said 20 minutes ago." I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. Brown eyes, messy dark hair that hadn't decided what direction it wanted to grow in. The kind of face people called sweet when they were being generous and forgettable when they weren't. I was an omega, second tier in a world that had very specific opinions about what that meant. And I had spent most of my life making myself smaller so people would stop reminding me. I pressed one hand flat against my stomach. Nothing felt different. I didn't feel different. I just looked like me. Tired, a little underfed, and holding a pregnancy test that made absolutely zero biological sense. How? That was the only word my brain could form. Just how? It happened when I finally opened the bathroom door. Dominic was leaning against the wall outside, arms crossed, already scanning my face the way he always did when he knew something was wrong. He opened his mouth, probably to say something devastatingly unhelpful, and then stopped, because every light in the hallway flickered. Not a power surge, not faulty wiring. Me. I felt it move through my chest like static, warm, involuntary, humming outward from somewhere beneath my ribs. The bulbs buzzed, dimmed, and then snapped back to full brightness all at once. Dominic blinked. Did you just do that?" "No," I said immediately. "Cal." I said no, Dom. He looked at the ceiling, looked at me, looked at the test still dangling from my fingers. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Is that a pregnancy test?" "It's a bookmark. It has 2 lines on it. It's a very informative bookmark." He stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then very quietly, "Callum, buddy, what happened?" And that gentle, careful question was somehow the worst thing he could have said, because I didn't have an answer. I had a test. I had 2 lines. I had a power I'd been hiding since I was 16, a body doing something it had no business doing, and absolutely no idea where to start. I sat down on the hallway floor. Dom sat down next to me without being asked. "I don't know," I said. "Sonnet, I genuinely do not know. Here's what I did know. 6 weeks ago, I'd been part of a university-affiliated medical study. Standard stuff, or so I thought. Hormonal tracking for omega biology. Compensation was $300, which I needed desperately because my scholarship had a gap, and my stepfather had made it very clear that his bank account did not. I'd gone in, signed the forms, let them draw blood and run their tests, and left. Done. Easy money, except now I was pregnant, and I had never, not once, been intimate with another person. My biology should have made natural conception without a bonded alpha nearly impossible. That was just omega physiology. It wasn't a preference or a choice. It was science, which meant the study hadn't just been a study. Someone had done something during that appointment. On something I hadn't consented to. Something that should have been impossible. Except there were 2 lines on a test that didn't lie, and a faint warm hum in my chest that flickered the lights when I was scared. The power always got louder when I was scared. I'd first noticed it at 16 during a panic attack in my school's science lab. Every electronic device in the room had shorted out simultaneously. My teacher had blamed old wiring. I had gone home and sat in the dark for 2 hours, convincing myself it was a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. Electrokinesis? That was the clinical word I'd eventually found, 3 years later, buried in a fringe omega biology form that the mainstream medical community preferred to pretend didn't exist. Rare, unpredictable, strongest under emotional pressure. Completely undocumented in any official capacity, because the official capacity preferred their omegas quiet and categorized and not capable of frying circuit boards with their feelings. I had never told anyone except Dom, and I had never, not once, used it on purpose. Dom made me tea I didn't drink and sat across from me at our small kitchen table while I stared at the ceiling and tried to think. "You need to call the clinic," he said. "I know. Like today." "I know, Dom." "Cal, I know." The lights hummed again. Dom looked up, then back at me with that specific expression he reserved for situations that were beyond his emotional pay grade. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to the email confirmation from the study. Harlow Medical Research Group, Principal Investigator, Dr. Patricia Voss. I called. One, it rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail. I called again. Same result. I searched the clinic address, a building on the west side of Portland, near the University Medical Campus, and found that the Harlow Medical Research Group had quietly dissolved its online presence sometime in the last month. Website gone, social pages deleted. My stomach dropped. "Dom," I said slowly, "the clinic doesn't exist anymore." He went very still. I kept scrolling, digging through cached pages, archive registrations, anything, until one name surfaced in a 3-year-old Portland Business Journal article about biomedical research funding in the Pacific Northwest. Primary donor and research patron, Elias Voss, CEO, Voss Biogenetics. Alpha King of the Western Pacific Pac Coalition, the most powerful alpha in the Western United States. The man publicly documented as biologically infertile. The lights in my kitchen didn't just flicker this time. They shattered. And that was the moment I understood. Whoever had stolen something from Elias Voss had used me to give it back to him. The question was whether he knew. The worst question was what he'd do when he found out. Glass crunched under my feet before I realized I'd stood up. 3 bulbs. Gone. Just like that. Dominic was already on his feet across the table, hands raised like he was trying to calm a very unstable electrical system. Which fair, because that's exactly what I was. "Cal, breathe." "I'm breathing." "You're not. You look like a man who just swallowed a live wire." "Dom." I turned the phone screen toward him. "Read that name." He squinted at it, read it once, read it again. One then sat back down very slowly, the way people sit when their legs have made a decision their brain hasn't caught up to yet. "Elias Voss," he said quietly. "Elias Voss," I confirmed. "As in the Elias Voss, Western Pac Coalition, 42 floors of glass in downtown Portland. Owns half of..." "Yes, the man who got publicly divorced 2 years ago because his ex-mate said he couldn't give her pups." "Yes, and you think..." "I don't think anything yet," I said, which was a lie so obvious even the broken light fixtures could tell. "I just need to understand how his name is attached to a clinic that experimented on omegas and then vanished." Dom was quiet for a moment, then very carefully. "Cal, if someone used you to carry his..." "Don't say it out loud." I pressed 2 fingers against my temple. "I'm not ready for that sentence to exist in the open air yet." The hum in my chest was still there, warm and restless, pulsing slightly, like it was responding to something I hadn't decided to feel yet. I hated that about my power. It never waited for permission. Emotions I was still negotiating internally would just broadcast, straight through every circuit within 20 feet. I grabbed my jacket off the back of my chair. "Where are you going?" Dom asked. "To find out if the clinic had a secondary address." "Right now? Cal, it's 9 in the morning, and you just shattered 3 light bulbs with your feelings." "Which is exactly why I need to move before I do something worse." I pulled my jacket on and grabbed my bag. "Stay here, don't touch the broken glass barefoot. And if anyone calls asking about a medical study, I'll tell them you moved to another country." "Perfect." The address I'd found in the cached article led me to a building on Northwest Lovejoy, one of those quiet streets in the Pearl District where everything looked expensive and vaguely European, and the coffee shops charged $8 for something that was mostly foam. The building itself was 5 stories, glass and brushed steel, with a very clean lobby visible through the front doors. No signage for Harlow Medical. Just a brass plate near the entrance that read, Voss Biogenetics, Pacific Northwest Division. I stood on the sidewalk for a full 30 seconds. Okay, I thought. So the clinic wasn't just funded by Voss Biogenetics, it was inside it. When a man in a gray suit walked past me into the building without a second glance, a courier came out. Normal Tuesday morning energy. Nobody standing on the sidewalk looked like they were carrying the potential heir of the most powerful alpha in the western United States. Just me. Lucky me. I pushed through the front door. The lobby was cool and quiet, all marble floors and recessed lighting. A reception desk sat at the center with a woman behind it who had the specific professional pleasantness of someone trained to make you feel welcome and removed simultaneously. She looked up. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, because lying about that felt pointless. But I was a participant in a research study that operated out of this building about 6 weeks ago. Harlow Medical Research Group. I have some follow-up questions. Something shifted in her expression. Barely. Just a micro-tightening around the eyes that most people would miss. I didn't miss it. I'm not familiar with that group, she said. That's interesting, I said pleasantly, because the archive business registration lists this building as their operating address. So either your tenant database has a gap, or someone here knows exactly what I'm talking about and would rather I didn't. She blinked. I smiled. Not aggressively, just enough. My power hummed. The monitor on her desk flickered once. She noticed. Her eyes dropped to the screen, then came back to me, and this time the professional warmth had developed a small crack in it. Sir, she said carefully, I'm going to need to ask you to... Callum. The voice came from behind me. Low. Controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to fill a room because the room already knew to pay attention. I turned around slowly because I was not going to give whoever that was the satisfaction of watching me spin on my heel. The man standing near the elevator bank was tall, genuinely tall, not the kind that's just posture, with dark hair cut close on the sides and eyes that were almost colorless in the lobby light. Gray, maybe, or pale green, the kind of color that changes depending on what he's feeling and gives absolutely nothing away in the process. He was looking at me like he knew something, not everything, but enough. How do you know my name? I asked. You signed consent forms, he said. Well, your name was on them. And you read them because I read everything that comes through this building. He tilted his head slightly. You should come upstairs. I should do a lot of things, I said. Most of them involve a lawyer. Something moved across his face. Not quite amusement, not quite surprise. Something in between that he pulled back before it fully formed. Then bring one, he said, but come upstairs first. My chest hummed. Every fluorescent panel above us buzzed softly. He looked up at the ceiling, then back at me. And for the first time since I'd walked in, Elias Voss looked like a man who hadn't entirely accounted for what he was dealing with. Good, I thought. Neither had I. The elevator was the kind that moved fast and silent, like it had been personally instructed not to waste Elias Voss's time. Brushed steel walls, recessed lighting, a faint scent in the air that I couldn't immediately categorize but that made the back of my neck do something I was choosing to ignore. He stood on the opposite side of the car, arms loose at his sides, eyes forward. I stood on my side and watched the floor numbers climb. 7, 12, 19. You're not going to say anything, I asked. I was waiting for you. How generous. I shifted my bag on my shoulder. Okay, I'll start. Someone at a clinic connected to your company inseminated me without my knowledge or consent during what I was told was a routine hormonal study. I am now pregnant. I have never been with anyone. So either your researchers developed a genuinely miraculous new definition of the word routine, or something extremely illegal happened in that building and you know about it. 3136. He was quiet for 4 more floors. I know about it, he said. The elevator opened. I didn't move. You know about it, I repeated. Come inside, Callum. I want to be very clear that I am not moving from this elevator until you explain what I know about it means, because that sentence has approximately 9 different implications, and at least 4 of them are criminal. He turned to look at me then. Really looked. Not the lobby assessment from downstairs, not the careful calculation of a man running a quiet cost-benefit analysis. Just direct, gray-green eyes that held something I hadn't expected. Exhaustion, not the tired kind, the older kind. The kind that lives behind someone's eyes when they've been carrying something heavy for so long, they've stopped noticing the weight. It mean, he said quietly, that I didn't order it, and that when I found out, the people responsible were already gone. 23 seconds of silence. That, I said, is somehow both reassuring and deeply unsatisfying. I know. You're going to have to do significantly better than that. I intend to. He held the elevator door with one hand. Please come inside. I looked at him, looked at the open door, looked back at him. My mother raised me smarter than this, I thought. Then I stepped out of the elevator. His office took up the entire north corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Mount Hood sitting blue and distant on the horizon, like it was trying to look unbothered. The kind of view that was supposed to make you feel small. I refused on principle. There was a long conference table to the left, a sitting area to the right with low charcoal sofas, and a desk at the far end that looked like it cost more than my rent for the next 3 years. Everything was clean and dark, and deliberately quiet in the way that only very expensive spaces manage. He gestured toward the sitting area. I sat. He sat across from me, forearms on his knees, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Up close he was, and I want to be objective here, unreasonably well constructed. Strong jaw, the faint shadow of someone who shaved this morning but would need to again by evening. Hands that looked like they'd done actual physical work at some point before the 42 floors in the gray suits. The scent I'd caught in the elevator was stronger here, pine and cold stone, and something underneath it that my omega biology was having a completely inappropriate reaction to given the circumstances. I redirected firmly. Talk, I said. He exhaled slowly. The Harlow study was approved through a subsidiary I don't personally oversee. It was presented to that division as a legitimate omega fertility research project. What I didn't know, what I found out 5 weeks ago, was that a member of my research team had modified the study protocol without authorization. Modified it how? They used stored genetic material. A pause. Mine. There it was, out loud, in a real room. The lights in his office didn't shatter this time. They just dimmed slightly, warm and slow, like they were holding their breath along with me. Your genetic material, I said. Yes, which they used to inseminate omega study participants. One participant. The others were control groups. The records we recovered indicate one successful. He stopped, chose the next word carefully. Outcome. I looked at him steadily. And you found out about this 5 weeks ago. Yes. So you've known for 5 weeks that somewhere out there was a person walking around unknowingly pregnant with your child. Yes. And your response was to just sit in this very tall building and wait? Something crossed his face, not defensiveness, closer to shame, closer to, we were trying to locate the participant through legitimate channels without triggering a legal. I'm sorry, I said. I need to stop you there because I want to make sure I understand. I leaned forward slightly. You found out that your company was used to perform non-consensual medical procedures on an omega, resulting in a pregnancy that person has no idea how to explain, and your first priority was protecting yourself from a lawsuit. That's not, because from where I'm sitting, which is directly across from you in the office of the man whose name is on every document connected to this situation, that's what it sounds like. His jaw tightened, not in anger, in something that looked a lot more like a man who had just been handed an accurate mirror and didn't love what he was seeing. You're right, he said. I blinked. One I had not expected that. I handled it wrong, he continued. I was trying to contain the damage legally, and I told myself that was protecting the participant. It wasn't. It was protecting the company. He held my gaze. I'm sorry, Callum. The hum in my chest shifted, still warm, still restless. But something in it had changed register, like a frequency finding its match. I hated that. Okay, I said, keeping my voice even. Apology received and filed. Now here's what happens next. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, pulling up the photo I'd taken of the pregnancy test before I left the apartment, and held it toward him. He looked at the screen. He went very still. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing a boardroom. Something deeper. Something that moved through his entire body and then stopped. See, like a system that had just received information it didn't have a category for. I'm approximately 6 weeks along, I said, which lines up exactly with the date of the study. I have the intake paperwork, my medical records, and a very good memory. I put the phone back in my bag. So, what I need from you right now is full transparency about what was done, why, and by who. And then we're going to have a much longer conversation about what comes next. He was still looking at the space where my phone had been. You're really... Yes. A beat of silence that felt like the whole city held still. Then he looked up at me, and whatever careful executive composure he'd maintained since the lobby was just gone. Not dramatically. It didn't collapse or crack. It just quietly stepped aside. And underneath it was a man who looked like he'd spent 2 years being told something was impossible, and was only now beginning to understand that impossible had never actually been the right word. His voice, when it came, was low and stripped of everything. I didn't know it would work, he said. I didn't think it could. Well, I said, and my voice only wavered slightly. Surprise. The lights in the office returned to full brightness. Neither of us laughed, but it was close. Neither of us laughed. But the silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Less like a wall and more like a room neither of us knew how to leave yet. Elias sat back slowly. His hands moved to his knees and stayed there. And then I watched him do the thing that powerful people do when something has genuinely surprised them. The micro recalibration, the quiet reassembly of composure, the careful return to a face that reveals nothing. He was good at it. I was better at noticing it. I want to be transparent with you, he said finally. You mentioned that downstairs. Still waiting on the delivery. A flicker behind his eyes. Not irritation, something closer to reluctant respect. The researcher who modified the study protocol was named Dr. Aaron Merritt. He was my lead geneticist for 3 years. He had access to stored samples that were never meant to be used clinically. He paused. He believed he was doing something that would help me. Help you, I repeated. I was diagnosed as infertile 4 years ago. It became public knowledge during my divorce. Merritt was... He exhaled. He was loyal in the way that becomes its own problem. He decided that if conventional methods couldn't produce an heir, unconventional ones could. Without asking you. Without asking me. I stared at him. So your scientist went rogue, used your genetic material without consent, inseminated an omega without consent, and framed the whole thing as a research study. Yes. And you fired him? Immediately. Good. Where is he now? A pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. That, Elias said carefully, is being handled. I narrowed my eyes. That answer has a body in it? It doesn't. It sounds like it does. He's in legal custody, Callum. My attorneys are cooperating with an investigation. There is no body. Another pause. That I know of. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Was that a joke? I asked. He looked at me with that unreadable gray-green gaze. I'm not sure. I haven't made one in a while. The first crack of thunder rolled in from the coast about 20 minutes into what had become an extremely complicated conversation about legal options, medical documentation, and the specific category of chaos that occurs when two people who have never met are suddenly, biologically, undeniably connected. Rain hit the floor-to-ceiling windows in a solid sheet. Portland weather had opinions, and it was sharing all of them. I stood up. I should go. The storm is rain, not lava. I'll be fine. My assistant can arrange a car. I have legs. Callum. He said my name the same way he'd said it in the lobby. Not commanding. Not soft either. Just precise. Squinted like he'd already decided it was the right word and was committed to it. I turned around. He was standing now too, which I hadn't heard happen, and he was closer than I'd recalibrated for. Not inappropriately close, just enough that the scent hit properly for the first time without furniture or formality between us. Pine, cold stone, and under that, something warmer. Amber almost. The kind of scent that my omega instincts were currently filing under. Do not engage and absolutely do not inhale deeply simultaneously. I inhaled deeply. I hated myself for it. There are things we haven't discussed yet, he said. Important ones. I know that. I'd like to discuss them before you walk out into a storm and I spend the next several hours unable to reach you. You don't have my number. I have your university email, Yeah, your department office address and your apartment building from the study intake form, he said. I wasn't going to use them without your permission, but I have them. I looked at him for a long moment. That, I said, is either very reassuring or deeply alarming, and I genuinely can't decide which. Sit down, he said. Please. The please landed differently than everything else. Quieter, like it cost something small but real to say it. I sat down. He sat across from me again, reached toward the low table between us, and pressed a button on a small console. Marcus, can you bring coffee? And whatever the kitchen has that's edible. A voice crackled back. Of course. Should I clear your 2 o'clock? Elias looked at me. I have a seminar at 4, I said. Clear the 2 o'clock, he said. Soren and the 3. I should have objected. I was aware of that. But the rain was loud against the glass, and my stomach had chosen this precise moment to remind me that I'd had half a bowl of cereal at 7 a.m., and nothing since, and apparently growing a person burned through breakfast faster than advertised. My stomach growled audibly. Elias had the decency not to comment. I appreciated that more than I wanted to. Marcus turned out to be a compact, efficient man in his 30s who arrived with a tray, set it down without making eye contact with either of us, and disappeared with the quiet competence of someone who had learned not to ask questions in this office. There was coffee, a small plate of sandwiches, and what appeared to be a bowl of fruit that nobody had requested, but that my body immediately identified as exactly what it needed. I picked up a sandwich. Elias wrapped both hands around a coffee mug and watched the rain. Can I ask you something personal? I said. You're carrying my child, he said. I think personal is unavoidable at this point. Did you want one? Before all this, when it was still a hypothetical, the question settled between us. He didn't answer immediately, which I was starting to understand was just how he operated. He didn't fill silence with words. He waited until the words were the right ones. Yes, he said. It was the one thing I wanted that I was told I couldn't have. The hum in my chest moved, slow and warm and quiet, like something listening. And your ex-mate, I said carefully, because she left because of the diagnosis. She left because she wanted a pack legacy, and I couldn't give her one. His voice was even. Not bitter, just factual, the way people get when they've processed something so many times it's worn smooth. She was honest about it. I respect that more than I would have respected a lie. That's a very mature perspective on someone leaving you for your biology. It took approximately 18 months to get there. And before the 18 months? He looked at me then, a long, quiet look. Before the 18 months, and he said, I demolished a training facility with my bare hands and then rebuilt it myself because I needed something to do with my hands. I stared at him. The whole facility. It was a small one. Elias. Something shifted in his expression at the sound of his name in my mouth. And just slightly. Like a door that had been closed for a long time, registering that someone had knocked. It was structurally unsound anyway, he said. That is the most aggressively alpha thing I have ever heard, and I went to a university that was 60% alpha population. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The shape of one, maybe. The place where a smile would be if he remembered how. You're funny, he said, like he was noting a weather pattern. I'm aware, I said. It's a coping mechanism. I developed it at 16 when my stepfather told me omegas and hard sciences were a statistical waste of resources. The almost smile disappeared. His eyes went flat and sharp in a way that was completely different from anything I'd seen from him yet. Not the controlled executive, not the exhausted man behind the glass. Something older and quieter and considerably more dangerous. He said that to you, Elias said. He said a lot of things. I kept my voice light. I'm a PhD candidate now, so I'd say the statistical waste of resources comment aged poorly. What's your research focus? Bioelectric fields and omega biology. I watched his face. Specifically, the relationship between emotional state and involuntary electromagnetic output. A beat. You're studying your own power, he said. I pointed at him. See, this is what I mean. You're quick. I respect that. How long have you had it? Since 16. It responds to emotional intensity, stress, fear, surprise. I glanced at the overhead lights. Occasionally sandwich-related relief. He followed my gaze to the ceiling. Back to me. Is it dangerous? To other people? Not unless they're made of electronics. I paused. Or are having a very bad day near exposed wiring. But that's never happened. Yet, he said. Yet, I agreed. The rain intensified against the glass. The city below had gone gray and soft, the streets shining, everything quieter under the weight of the storm. I ate another half of my sandwich and let the silence sit between us without trying to fix it. It was, I realized, the most comfortable I'd felt since two pink lines had rearranged my entire Tuesday. That scared me considerably more than the pregnancy. I sat with that realization for exactly 4 seconds before deciding to file it under problems for future Callum and focus on the present situation, which was already plenty. Elias had refilled his coffee. He was looking at the rain again, both hands around the mug, and there was something in his posture that had shifted over the last hour. Still controlled, still contained. But the edges were softer somehow, like a building after a long day stops trying quite so hard to look permanent. There's something else, he said. Of course there is. You're not going to like it. Elias. I set down my coffee. I found out I was pregnant this morning, traced the origin to a dissolved ghost clinic, rode an elevator 42 floors with a stranger who turned out to be the biological father, and ate sandwiches in his office while a storm tried to remove Portland from the map. My threshold for not liking things has been recalibrated significantly today. Just say it. He turned from the window and looked at me directly. Merritt didn't act alone, he said. The hum in my chest went very still, not quiet. T still, the way air goes still before something loud happens. What does that mean exactly, I said. It means the study was approved through my subsidiary, but the directive to modify the protocol came from above Merritt's clearance level. He set his mug down. Someone inside the PAC Coalition's inner council authorized it. Someone with access to my medical records, my stored samples, and the authority to greenlight a covert study without my knowledge. I stared at him. Someone in your own PAC? Yes. Ordered an unauthorized medical procedure on an Omega? Yes. Using your genetic material? Yes. To produce an heir that you didn't know about. So that when the child existed, he said quietly, it could be used as leverage. The word landed like something physical. Leverage. I heard it and understood immediately, knowing in the specific way that people who grew up watching powerful people use smaller ones understand things, that this had never been about helping Elias. It had never been about science or fertility or legacy in any genuine sense. It was about control. Someone wanted an heir they could point to, a child connected to the Alpha King by blood, held by an Omega who had no power, no pack, no protection, a card to play whenever the game required it. And I was the card. Who? I said. My voice came out very flat and very calm, which was not at all how the rest of me felt. I have a suspect, Elias said. I don't have proof yet. Who do you suspect? He held my gaze. My brother. His name, Elias told me, was Conrad Voss, younger by 4 years, positioned as second in the PAC Coalition hierarchy, publicly supportive, privately ambitious in the way that only people raised in the same house as power learn to be, quietly, thoroughly, and with a smile that fit perfectly over everything it was hiding. He never contested the Alpha King title openly, Elias said. Conrad doesn't work that way. He finds the indirect route, the one that looks like loyalty until it doesn't. And you think he decided that if you had an heir, he could control the heir. I worked through it out loud. Unknown Omega, no pack connection, no resources, easy to pressure, easy to threaten. The child becomes Conrad's leverage over your legacy without him ever having to challenge you directly. Yes, that, I said, Irene is genuinely diabolical. He's genuinely diabolical. And you've known him your whole life, which is exactly why it took me longer than it should have to look at him clearly. I leaned back against the sofa cushion and looked at the ceiling. The lights above me were steady. My power was still doing that quiet, listening thing, humming low and watchful in my chest like it was paying closer attention to this conversation than I was ready to acknowledge. Okay, I said to the ceiling. So let me summarize. I am pregnant via non-consensual medical procedure. The procedure was authorized by your brother as part of a long-term political power play. The researcher who carried it out is in legal custody, but the person who actually ordered it is still sitting inside your PAC's inner council, fully operational, and almost certainly aware that the study produced a successful result. Yes, which means he knows about me. A pause. Almost certainly, Elias said. I lowered my gaze from the ceiling and looked at him. You should have led with that, I said. I know. Elias, that is the most important piece of information in this entire conversation, and you saved it for after the sandwiches. I was trying to establish trust first. You can establish trust and also warn someone that they might be in danger. Those are not mutually exclusive activities. Something moved across his face that might, on a different person, have been called chagrin. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and start strategizing, and I said, if Conrad knows the study worked, what does he do next? Does he come for me directly? Does he try to establish legal claim over the pregnancy? What's his move? Elias was quiet for a moment, not the processing kind of quiet, the kind where the answer exists and he's deciding how much of it to share. Tell me all of it, I said before he could edit. Not the version you think I can handle. All of it. He looked at me for a long moment. Conrad's move, he said carefully, depends on whether he thinks I know it was him. If he believes I'm still in the dark, he'll try to find you first, establish contact, offer resources, protection, money, position himself as your ally before I can. So he'll try to get to me before you could warn me. Yes. And if he already knows you found me, then he accelerates. Elias's jaw tightened. He'll try to establish legal standing over the pregnancy through pack coalition law. An heir connected to the Alpha King's bloodline falls under pack jurisdiction. If he can argue that I'm unfit or uninvolved, he could claim guardianship through the coalition council. Over my child. Over the heir. My child, I said again, harder this time. His eyes met mine. Yes, your child. The lights in the office flared briefly, warm gold flooding the room for 2 full seconds before settling. Elias did not look away. I'm not going to let that happen, he said. Neither am I said. But I need you to understand something very clearly right now. I leaned forward. I walked in here alone this morning with a pregnancy test and a bad feeling. I don't have a pack. I don't have coalition standing. And I don't have political leverage or a legal team or 42 floors of reinforced glass between me and whatever Conrad Voss decides to do next. I held his gaze. What I have is a power that shorts out electronics when I'm stressed, a best friend who is currently probably eating my cereal, and a PhD that nobody in this building cares about. So if you're asking me to trust you, I need to know exactly what that trust is worth. The rain against the windows was the only sound for a moment. Elias set down his coffee mug. He leaned forward, matching my posture, close enough that the amber warmth of his scent moved through the space between us again. It's worth this, he said. I will move you out of your apartment today. I will assign security. I will give you access to my legal team, my medical team, and every document connected to that study. I will not make decisions about this pregnancy without your input, and I will not treat you as a political variable. A pause. And I will not let my brother touch what is yours. What is yours? Not what is mine. Not my heir or my legacy. Yours. I felt that land somewhere underneath my ribs and tried very hard not to let it show on my face. That's a significant offer, I said, keeping my voice level. It's a significant situation. I have conditions. I expected you would. I finished my PhD, non-negotiable. I am not becoming a political footnote with a half-finished dissertation. Agreed. Dominic comes with me. He's my emergency contact and my only functional support system, and I'm not leaving him in an apartment building with potentially compromised security while Conrad Voss is running loose. Agreed. And if at any point I decide this arrangement isn't working, I leave. No legal complications, no coalition interference, no guilt. He was quiet for just a moment, just one. Agreed, he said, on one condition of my own. I raised an eyebrow. You tell me, he said, when something is wrong. Not after. Not when it's already dangerous. When it starts. I looked at him, at the steadiness in his face, at the exhaustion behind his eyes that hadn't gone anywhere, but had somehow become less heavy in the last hour. Deal, I said. We didn't shake hands. We just held eye contact for 3 seconds longer than was strictly necessary. In the rain loud against the glass and the city gray below us, and something shifted in the room that neither of us named. I was smart enough to know what it was. I was also smart enough to know it was the most complicated thing in an already impossible situation. So I picked up the last piece of fruit from the bowl, ate it, and said, now, tell me about Conrad, everything from the beginning. And Elias Voss, Alpha King of the Western Pacific Pac Coalition, the most powerful man in this half of the country, took a breath and started talking. He told me about Conrad the way people talk about weather patterns they grew up with. Not dramatically, just accurately, with the specific precision of someone who has spent years learning to read a thing that keeps changing shape. Conrad was 38, charming in the architectural sense, meaning the charm was load-bearing and everything else was built around it. He had spent 12 years inside the Pac Coalition's inner council, collecting allies the way other people collected debt, and he was extraordinarily good at making people feel chosen. He never asked for loyalty directly, Elias said. He makes you feel like giving it was your own idea. So he's a manipulator with good social reviews, I said. Essentially. And he's been your second since when? Since our father died, 6 years ago. And in 6 years, he never made a move openly. Conrad doesn't make open moves. He creates situations where the outcome he wants appears to be the only logical conclusion. Elias's voice was flat and precise. The study was classic Conrad. He didn't forge my signature or steal my samples himself. He found someone who already wanted to help me, pointed that loyalty in a direction that served him, and made sure his own fingerprints were one layer removed from everything. Merritt, I said. Merritt genuinely believed he was helping me. Conrad probably told him I secretly wanted this, but couldn't pursue it officially for political reasons. Elias exhaled slowly. He would have framed it as devotion. Merritt would have believed every word. I turned that over in my mind, the specific cruelty of it. Not just the action, but the architecture. Using someone's love as a tool without ever letting them know they were being used. He sounds exhausting, I said. He's the most exhausting person I've ever known, and I've known him since he was 4 years old. Did you like him? Before? Elias was quiet for a moment. I loved him, he said. That's different from liking someone and considerably harder to stop doing, even when you should. I didn't have a response to that wasn't going to go somewhere complicated, so I was in the process of selecting a neutral follow-up question when the office door opened. Not knocked, opened. Marcus appeared in the doorway with an expression that was professionally neutral in the specific way that meant he was personally alarmed. Sir, he said, your brother's in the lobby. The room did not change temperature. It just felt like it did. Elias stood up in one motion, completely controlled, not a single degree of visible reaction beyond the slight stillness that moved through his shoulders. I stayed seated. My power surged hot and immediate beneath my ribs, bright and electric, and the way it always did when my body registered a threat before my brain finished processing one. The overhead lights brightened sharply for 2 seconds. Elias looked at me. I looked back. He doesn't know that I know about him, I said quietly, quickly. Does he know what I look like? He knows a name from the intake forms. He may have a photo from the university directory. So he knows enough. Enough to recognize you, yes. I thought about this for approximately 4 seconds. Option 1, leave through a back exit, let Elias handle it, spend the rest of the afternoon in protective ignorance. Option 2, stay. Let Conrad Voss walk into this room, look me in the eye, and have absolutely no idea that I already know everything. I picked up my coffee mug. Tell Marcus to send him up, I said. Elias looked at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize as his version of surprised, which on anyone else would have been wide eyes and an open mouth, but on him was just a fractional shift in the set of his jaw. Callum, he's going to find out I exist regardless, I said calmly. Right now I have information he doesn't know I have, and that is the only advantage I own in this entire situation. I am not leaving before I get a look at him. I met his eyes. I won't say anything about the study. I'll be a grad student you're consulting about Omega bioelectric research, which is technically true. That's a significant risk. I have a power that reads emotional frequency through electromagnetic fields, I said. I will know within 30 seconds if he's lying about anything. That seems worth the risk. Elias held my gaze, and then he looked at Marcus. Send him up. Marcus disappeared. Elias turned back to me. If at any point you want to leave, I'll short out his phone and use the distraction, I said. I've done it before. You've deliberately shorted someone's phone before? I said what I said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, gone before it fully arrived. Stay close to me, he said quietly. I was planning on it. He walked in like a man who had never once in his life entered a room and wondered if he was welcome. That was the first thing I noticed. Not his looks, though he was objectively good-looking in the polished, well-maintained way of men who treat appearance as infrastructure. Not his clothes, though the suit was clearly expensive and worn like he'd forgotten it was. It was the walk. The absolute cellular certainty that the room would rearrange itself around him. He was slightly shorter than Elias, lighter in coloring, warmer in expression, with brown eyes that moved quickly, and a smile that arrived exactly one beat before it should have, which meant it had been prepared in advance. He saw Elias first. Brother. Warm. Easy. Crossing the room with his arms slightly open, the body language of a man performing closeness he had practiced until it felt genuine. Then his eyes moved to me. The smile didn't change. That was how I knew he'd already known I was here. I didn't realize you had company, he said in the tone of someone who absolutely had realized. Conrad. Elias's voice was even. Perfectly even. This is Callum Reed. He's a PhD candidate at Portland State. Yet we're consulting on a research project. Conrad turned the full warmth of his attention toward me and extended his hand. I shook it. The moment his skin touched mine, my power moved. Not outward, inward, like a frequency tuning itself, reaching through the contact point and pulling back information the way it sometimes did when I was paying close attention. I discovered this ability 2 years ago by accident during a handshake with a professor who smiled while telling me my research proposal was excellent and simultaneously felt electromagnetically, like a wall. Conrad Voss felt like a signal running underneath a different signal. On the surface, warmth, interest, openness. Underneath, steady and controlled and completely separate, calculation. He was performing every single thing about this interaction. Callum, he said, now what's your research focus? Bioelectric fields in omega biology, I said pleasantly, specifically involuntary electromagnetic output under emotional stimulus. Fascinating. His eyes were attentive, and his smile was perfect, and his underneath frequency did not change by a single degree. Are you local? Northeast Portland. And you came all the way downtown in this weather. He gestured toward the rain-soaked windows with easy charm. You must be dedicated. I'm very motivated, I said. My power hummed. His phone, tucked in his jacket breast pocket, buzzed once with what sounded like a notification. Conrad glanced down briefly. Back up. Elias, he said, shifting smoothly. I actually stopped by about the coalition meeting Thursday. There's a scheduling conflict with the Northern Territory reps. He was already pivoting. She'd already redirecting. The conversation about me filed away behind his eyes where I could feel it sitting, waiting. He was good. He was so good. And he had absolutely no idea that I had just read every layer of him through a handshake. I sat back, wrapped both hands around my mostly empty coffee mug, and let Elias handle the logistics of whatever Thursday's meeting was about. But I kept my eyes on Conrad, and Conrad, I noticed, kept finding reasons to let his gaze drift back to me. Not suspiciously, not obviously, just enough to remind me, in the language of powerful men who never say what they mean directly, that he had not forgotten I was there. Neither have I thought. Conrad left 12 minutes later. He shook Elias's hand, smiled at me one last time with those warm brown eyes that felt like a screensaver running over something much colder. Said it was lovely to meet me in the tone of someone storing information rather than expressing pleasure. Then he was gone. The office felt different without him in it. Lighter, but not in a good way. The way a room feels lighter after something has been removed that you didn't realize was pressing down on everything. I set my mug down. He knew I was here before he walked in, I said. I know. Elias was still facing the closed door. His phone buzzed right after I shorted it. He checked it, then redirected the entire conversation within 15 seconds. He was confirming something. I paused. He has a contact in this building. Elias turned. What? Someone told him you had a visitor. Someone with enough access to know your office schedule. I watched his face process that. I'm not saying it's Marcus. It's not Marcus. I'm saying it's someone. Conrad doesn't show up unannounced on a stormy Tuesday for a scheduling conflict he could have emailed about. He came to see me. He just needed to do it in a way that looked coincidental. Elias crossed the room slowly and stopped at the window. His back was to me and both hands were in his pockets, and I could read the tension in his shoulders the same way I read electromagnetic frequencies. Layered, controlled. Something underneath working hard against the surface. He's moving faster than I expected, he said quietly. People move fast when they think they're about to lose something, I said. What does he lose if you acknowledge this pregnancy officially? Everything. Elias didn't turn around. If I have a biological heir, Conrad's position as my succession default dissolves. 12 years of patience and positioning, gone. The coalition council shifts. His alliances lose their value. A pause. He loses the future he's been architecting since our father died. I sat with that for a moment. So from his perspective, I said slowly, the ideal outcome is that I disappear, or that the pregnancy doesn't reach a point where it can be officially registered with the coalition. The word disappear landed in the room and stayed there. Elias turned from the window. His face was doing the controlled thing again, but his eyes were not. His eyes were doing something considerably more raw and considerably less managed. Sergeant, I'm not going to let that happen, he said. You said that already. I mean it more now. Meaning it more doesn't change the logistics, I said. Conrad has a contact in your building. He knows what I look like, and he came here within hours of you finding me. That's not slow. That's someone who has been ready to move the moment the study results surfaced. I stood up. I need to call Dom. He needs to know what's happening. Callum, Elias stepped forward. Before you do, there's something I need to tell you. The tone of it stopped me. Not the volume, the weight. I turned around slowly. He stood in the middle of his very expensive, very quiet office, with the rain still going hard at the windows behind him. And he looked like a man who had been holding something at arm's length for long enough that his arms were tired. Sierra, I contacted the PAC Coalition legal office this morning, he said, before you arrived. I went very still. I filed a preliminary registration, he continued, flagging the study outcome as a potential heir claim under coalition jurisdiction. It was meant to establish legal standing before Conrad could. He held my gaze. I didn't know yet who the participant was. I was working from recovered records. I filed based on the biological data. The hum in my chest went cold. Not hot, not bright. Cold, which was new and considerably worse. You filed a legal claim, I said, on a pregnancy, belonging to a person you hadn't met yet, to protect, without asking me. I didn't know who you were yet. Elias, my voice came out quiet, completely level. In the specific kind of level that happens when something hot burns down to something much more dangerous. You filed a coalition legal document claiming jurisdiction over a pregnancy inside a person's body without their knowledge or consent. He didn't look away. Yes. Do you understand, I said carefully, that the thing you just described is structurally identical to what Merritt did? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd heard all day. Something moved through his face, not defensiveness, not argument, a slow, terrible understanding, the kind that doesn't arrive with noise but just settles in and stays, changing the shape of everything it touches. That's not what I intended, he said. Intentions don't edit actions. I picked up my bag. My hands were steady. I was very focused on keeping them steady. You sat across from me for 3 hours and told me you handled the initial discovery wrong. You apologized. You said you'd make decisions with my input. You said it 20 minutes ago. I looked at him directly. And then you told me you'd already made one without me before I even walked through the door. Callum, I'm not finished. I wasn't raising my voice. I didn't need to. I understand the legal logic. I understand Conrad and timing and coalition jurisdiction. I'm a PhD candidate, not a child. I can follow the reasoning. I held his gaze. But you didn't give me the chance to follow it with you. You made the call and then built trust on top of it and waited to see if I'd notice. I was going to tell you. When? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. After you agreed to stay, he said. Every light in the office blew. Not a flicker, not a dimming. A full, simultaneous, complete loss of every bulb in the room, sudden and total, leaving nothing but the gray storm light coming through the windows and the soft emergency glow of the exit panel near the door. In the half-dark, Elias Voss stood completely still. I stood completely still. The hum in my chest was enormous and cold, and I pressed one hand flat against my sternum the way I had in the bathroom mirror that morning, trying to hold it steady, trying to keep it from going further than it already had. I'm sorry, he said, into the dark, quietly. I know, I said. That doesn't fix it. No, I said. It doesn't. I walked toward the elevator. He didn't stop me. which I had not fully prepared for. Some part of me had expected him to step forward, to reach out, was to do the alpha thing where proximity becomes persuasion. He didn't. He stayed exactly where he was and let me move, and somehow that was worse than if he'd tried to stop me. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. I stepped in, turned around. He was still standing in the center of his dark office, hands at his sides, the stormlight from the windows, making everything behind him look like the end of something. "The filing," I said. "Can it be amended?" "Yes," he said, "to include you as the primary rights holder. I should have structured it that way from the beginning." "Fix it," I said. "Tonight." "I will." The doors began to close. "Callum," his voice one last time, crossing the narrowing gap between us. I held the door. "Just for a second." "I meant what I said," he said. "All of it. How even the parts I said wrong." I looked at him across the darkened room. "I know," I said again. I let the doors close. The elevator moved downward, quiet and fast, and I stood in the brushed steel walls with my hands still pressed against my chest and my power still humming cold and enormous, and I thought about the way he'd said yours an hour ago. What is yours? And then I thought about a legal document filed this morning with my name nowhere on it. Both things were true at the same time. That was the part I didn't know what to do with. The elevator reached the lobby and opened into cool marble and recessed lighting, and the sound of rain against the front glass doors, heavy and relentless. The kind of Portland rain that doesn't perform, it just commits. The receptionist looked up as I crossed toward the exit. Her expression was carefully blank in the way it had been since I'd walked in, except now there was something underneath it, a watchfulness, the kind that made me wonder, not for the first time, who else in this building was running a secondary frequency under their primary one. I pushed through the front doors. The rain hit immediately, cold, direct, thoroughly unimpressed with my lack of an umbrella. I stopped under the narrow overhang and pulled out my phone. Dom had texted 4 times. The first one said, "You okay?" The second, "Cal, seriously, where are you?" The third, "Someone knocked on our door asking for you by name, and I did not like the energy." The fourth, sent 6 minutes ago, just said, "Call me right now." My stomach dropped straight through the wet pavement. I called. He picked up on the first ring. "Cal." "Nah, thank God." His voice was doing the thing it only did when he was genuinely scared, which was almost never. Dominic was the kind of person who stayed calm during fire drills and only panicked quietly, internally, after everything was resolved. Hearing actual fear in his voice was like hearing a building creak before it leans. "Talk to me," I said. "What happened?" "2 guys showed up maybe 40 minutes after you left. Suits. Very polished. Very were just asking questions energy. That was absolutely not just asking questions energy." He exhaled. "They said they were from a health services follow-up team connected to the study you participated in. They wanted to know if you were home. They wanted to know when you'd be back." "What did you tell them?" "I told them you'd moved to Portugal to study marine biology, and I was subletting." "Dom." I know, but Cal, they were already inside the building. They didn't knock on the lobby door. They knocked on our actual apartment door. Someone let them in." The rain came down harder. My power surged in a long, slow wave that shorted out the street lamp directly above the overhang. It flickered twice and died. "Are you still in the apartment?" I asked. "Yes, should I not be?" "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm figuring out next steps right now." "Cal, what is happening?" "I will explain everything, I promise, but right now I need you to lock the door and stay away from the windows and maybe also move away from any electronics because I'm a little emotionally elevated and I don't want to fry your laptop from across the city." A beat of silence. "Your power is acting up," he said, significantly. "Okay." I heard the deadbolt slide home through the phone. Locked, stepped away from the laptop, sitting on the kitchen floor like a person having a normal Tuesday. Another beat. "Cal, how bad is it?" I looked out at the rain-soaked street, at the gray city, at the building behind me reflected in the wet glass of the doors. 42 floors of brushed steel and money, and an alpha king standing in a dark office who had made a decision without me and was sorry about it and was also, one currently the only structural option I had. "It's pretty bad," I said honestly, "but I think I know what to do." "That's either very reassuring or terrifying." "Probably both. Give me 10 minutes. I hung up, stood in the rain for approximately 4 seconds. Then I turned around and walked back through the front door. The receptionist looked up as I crossed the lobby for the second time in 4 minutes, soaking wet, with the expression of a man who had made a decision he wasn't thrilled about but was committed to anyway. "I need to go back up," I said. She reached for her phone without a word. Smart woman. The elevator opened. I stepped in. Pressed 42. The ride up was faster than I remembered, or maybe I was just more impatient than I'd been on the way down. I stood in the center of the car and thought about Dom locked in our apartment 40 minutes after Conrad Voss had stood in this building with his prepared smile and his secondary frequency and his very careful eyes. 40 minutes. Conrad had made his move 40 minutes ago, while he was standing in Elias's office performing a scheduling conflict, while I was sitting on that sofa reading his electromagnetic layers like a book. He had been running 2 operations simultaneously and neither of them had hesitated. The elevator opened. Elias was in the hallway, not in his office. The hallway, which meant he'd heard the elevator and come out, which meant he'd been close to the door, which meant he hadn't moved far after I left. He looked at me, at the wet hair and the rain-soaked jacket and whatever was happening on my face. "Conrad sent people to my apartment," I said, 40 minutes ago, while he was standing in your office, while I was sitting 12 feet away reading his frequency through a handshake. My voice was steady. I was very proud of it. "He had them inside my building, at my actual door, within 2 hours of you finding me. Dom is locked in. He's fine, but he's alone, and I live on the 3rd floor, and our building security is 1 camera that hasn't worked since February." Elias didn't say anything for 1 full second. Then he said, "Come inside." "I'm not done." "Callum, I'm angry at you," I said clearly. "I want that on record. What you did this morning was wrong, and we are not finished talking about it, and I have not forgiven it." I held his gaze in the hallway light. "And I am also walking back through that door because I need help, and you are currently the only person who can provide it, and I am choosing to be an adult about the fact that both of those things are true simultaneously." Something moved through his face that was too complex to name quickly. "That's fair," he said quietly. "It's extremely fair," I said. "Now call whoever you need to call to get Dom out of that apartment safely, and then we are going to sit down and you are going to show me that amended filing with my name on it before I agree to anything else." He already had his phone out. "Marcus," he said the moment it connected, "I need a security team at an address in Northeast Portland. Now." He looked at me. "And get a car to the front of the building." I gave him Dom's address. Once he repeated it into the phone without breaking eye contact with me. And standing in that hallway, soaking wet, angry, 6 weeks pregnant, and running on adrenaline and cold coffee, I felt something settle in my chest underneath the hum of my power. Not comfort exactly, not trust, not yet, not fully. Just the specific solidity of a decision made clearly, with both eyes open, by a person who knew exactly what they were walking into. "One more thing," I said. He lowered the phone slightly. "If you ever make a decision that involves me or my child without asking me first," I said, "I will not come back up in the elevator." He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. "Understood," he said. "Good." I pushed wet hair off my forehead. "Now let's go get my best friend." Marcus had a car at the front of the building in 4 minutes flat. On a black SUV, tinted windows, driver who introduced himself as Joel, and had the calm, unhurried energy of someone professionally trained to make dangerous situations feel like errands. Elias got in beside me without asking. I let him. The city moved past the windows in gray and wet and blurred streetlight. Portland doing its signature impression of a city processing difficult emotions through weather. I sat with my bag on my lap and my hands folded over it and watched the buildings change from steel and glass to brick and neighborhood as we moved northeast. "Conrad will know the security team went to your address," Elias said quietly. "Good," I said. "Let him know I'm not sitting still." A pause. "Most people, when they find out Conrad has moved against them, go quiet," Elias said. "They pull back. I try to become smaller targets." "I'm not most people. I'm aware of that." Another pause, softer. "I'm glad of that." I didn't respond, but I also didn't move away from the warmth of him sitting 12 inches to my left, which my power noted with great enthusiasm, and I chose to note and then set aside for later. The SUV turned onto my street. The security team, 2 people in understated jackets who looked like they could dismantle a situation before it knew it had started, were already in the building lobby when we arrived. Our apartment door was still locked. Dom opened it approximately 1 second after I knocked, grabbed my arm, pulled me inside, looked past me at Elias in the hallway and said, "Absolutely not. Dom, Cal, that man has cheekbones like an architectural decision. And I don't trust it. That's not a reason to distrust someone. It's a reason to be cautious." Dom looked at Elias with the specific energy of a person who loves someone and was not going to make that easy for anyone who'd contributed to their difficult Tuesday. "You're the Alpha King." "Yes," Elias said. "Your company's researcher did something deeply illegal to my best friend." "Yes. And now you're in our hallway." "Yes." Dom turned to me. "I have questions." "I know. Pack a bag first." "How big a bag?" "Enough for a while." He looked at me, looked at Elias, looked back at me with an expression that communicated an entire conversation without a single word, the specific fluency of people who have been friends long enough to speak in subtext. "You like him," Dom said quietly. "I'm furious at him," I said. "Yalmer, that's a yes." He disappeared into his room. I turned back to Elias, who was standing in my hallway looking at my apartment with an expression I couldn't immediately categorize. Not judgment, something quieter. He was looking at the desk covered in research papers, the plant on the windowsill that was surviving through what I could only describe as spite, the corkboard above my desk covered in notes and printed journal articles, and one photo of me and Dom at last year's department picnic looking sunburned and happy. He was looking at my life, the actual shape of it. "It's small," I said, not defensively, just factually. "It's yours," he said, the same way he'd said it upstairs, like the word meant something specific when applied to me. My power hummed warm, and I let it. We were 40 minutes from the building. Watched Dom's bag by the door and Elias on a quiet phone call with his legal team when Marcus called back. I watched Elias's face as he listened. It went through several things in quick succession. Still, then tight, then something that settled into a cold, deliberate calm that was different from all his other calms. This one had edges. He hung up. "Conrad filed a challenge," he said, "with the Coalition Council. He's claiming the pregnancy is the result of unauthorized use of Coalition genetic assets and arguing that it falls under Council jurisdiction rather than individual alpha rights." I stared at him. He's trying to claim my baby belongs to a council. He's trying to remove it from both of us simultaneously and place it under committee jurisdiction where he holds 3 of the 7 votes. That is genuinely the most bureaucratically villainous thing I have ever heard. "He filed 20 minutes ago. He must have had it prepared and waiting." "Okay." I sat down on the arm of my sofa, thought for exactly 10 seconds. "What does your amended filing say?" "The one with my name on it. That the pregnancy resulted from an unauthorized medical procedure, that you are the gestational parent with full primary rights, and that I am acknowledging biological connection and requesting co-recognition under coalition law." His eyes met mine. "It was filed at 7:14 this evening. Before Conrad's challenge. 43 minutes before." I felt something loosen in my chest. "So his challenge lands after a filing that already establishes my rights as primary," I said, "which means the council cannot assume jurisdiction over a pregnancy where primary parental rights are already registered and uncontested by the gestational parent." He held my gaze steadily. "Conrad needed you unrepresented. The moment your name went on that document, his entire strategy collapsed." "You fixed the filing," I said. "Tonight, like I asked. The moment the elevator closed," he said quietly. "I called legal before the lights came back on." The room was very still. Dom appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, holding a duffel bag, read the atmosphere, and silently retreated 1 step back. "Smart man." "You fixed it before you knew I was coming back up," I said. "Yes." "Not because you thought it would bring me back." "No, because it was wrong and you were right, and those 2 facts existed whether or not you ever walked back through that door." I looked at him across my small living room with its spite plant and its corkboard and its radiator that grieved loudly through the walls. He stood there in his expensive suit that had gotten slightly damp from the hallway, hands at his sides, not performing anything. Not managing, not calculating, just standing in the actual honest shape of himself, which turned out, underneath everything, to be a man who was tired and sorry, and trying in the specific way that doesn't announce itself. "Come here," I said. He crossed the room, stopped in front of me, close enough that the pine and amber of his scent settled around me, like something that had always been there, and I'd only just learned to recognize it. I reached up and pressed my hand flat against his chest, the way I'd pressed my hand against my own sternum all day when my power got too loud. His heartbeat was there immediately, steady, slightly faster than controlled. His hand came up and covered mine, warm and careful and asking nothing. "I'm still angry," I said quietly. "I know. And we have approximately 9,000 complicated things ahead of us. I know. And I have a dissertation to finish. I know. And you demolished a building with your hands once, which I think about more than is probably appropriate." Something happened to his face then. Well, the almost smile from earlier came all the way through this time, slow and real and slightly helpless. The expression of a man ambushed by something he hadn't budgeted for. It changed him completely. It was honestly unfair. "Callum," he said softly. "Don't," I said. "Don't say something earnest right now. I can't handle earnest on top of everything else." "Okay." His thumb moved slightly across the back of my hand. "Can I say something honest instead? Those are sometimes the same thing." "This one isn't." He looked at me steadily. "I've spent 4 years being told the thing I wanted most was impossible, and I made peace with that. I built my life around the edges of it." A pause. "And then you walked into my lobby soaking wet with a pregnancy test and absolutely no interest in being managed, and I think I understood within the first 20 minutes that impossible was never actually the right word." The lights in my apartment glowed warm and full and steady. My power, for the first time all day, went completely quiet. Not suppressed, quiet. The specific stillness of something that has found its frequency and stopped searching. I looked up at him. He looked down at me. "Okay," I said. "That was a little earnest." "Apologies. I didn't say stop." I tightened my hand slightly against his chest. "I just said I couldn't handle it. Those aren't the same thing either." He understood. I could see it in the way something in his eyes settled finally into something that wasn't exhausted or careful or managed. Just present." I leaned forward and pressed my forehead against his collarbone, which was not a planned action and was entirely my body making a decision my brain was still reviewing. His chin dropped toward the top of my head. His other arm came around slowly. No urgency, just warmth and steadiness and the solid fact of him. We stayed like that for a moment. Dom's voice floated from the hallway. "I'm going to pretend I need something from the kitchen and walk past you both in approximately 30 seconds, so someone should probably move." I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that comes up without warning and doesn't have any performance in it. Elias's chest moved under my forehead. Low and warm. He was laughing too. Conrad's challenge was dismissed by the Coalition Council 11 days later on procedural grounds. His 3 votes weren't enough once the primary rights filing stood unchallenged, and 2 of his own allied council members, presented with the full documented evidence of the unauthorized study, quietly stepped away from him. He didn't disappear. Men like Conrad never disappear. But he lost the architecture he'd spent 12 years building, and he lost it because he'd underestimated an Omega PhD student with a power nobody had documented and absolutely no patience for being someone else's variable. Merritt cooperated fully with the investigation in exchange for reduced charges. The Harlow Medical Research Group became a case study in Omega rights law that I would eventually cite in my own dissertation, which I defended 14 months later, 7 weeks after our son was born. His name was August. And he had Elias's eyes and my electricity. We discovered the second part at 3 weeks old when he shorted out the baby monitor during a dream and scared Dom so badly he knocked over an entire shelf of books. I was unreasonably proud. Elias stood in the doorway of the nursery at 2 in the morning, watching August sleep and looking like a man who had spent 4 years making peace with impossible and was still, quietly, adjusting to the fact that it had arrived anyway. I stood beside him. Our shoulders touched. "He did the thing again," Elias said quietly. "He did the thing again," I confirmed. "Is that normal?" For him, apparently, yes. Should we be concerned? "I'm a bioelectric researcher specializing in omega electromagnetic output," I said. "Our son is my entire dissertation come to life. I am the opposite of concerned." Elias looked at me sideways. That almost smile. The real one. the one I'd watched come all the way through for the first time in my small living room 4 months ago. "You're going to publish a paper about our infant," he said, with his permission, when he's old enough to consent. "He's 3 weeks old. Science is patient." August made a small sound in his sleep. Both of us went still, instinctively, the held breath stillness of new parents everywhere. He settled. We exhaled. Elias's hand found mine in the dark of the nursery doorway, and I let my fingers close around his, and the light stayed warm and steady and quiet all around us. Not perfect, not finished, not easy, not any of it. Just ours. That was enough. That was everything. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even crazier and more intriguing than you can imagine. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. The next story drops soon.